Hey guys, and welcome to my pre-release analysis for the upcoming Liberation characters coming to the game soon. In this video, we have 3 different characters to cover, namely Sin, Quency, and Guilty. Players will be able to get all of these characters for free, but it does take a while to get them. So it's important to know how each of the characters work to make a better informed decision when choosing which one to go for. If you want a more detailed explanation on how to get these characters for free, I will be leaving a link in the description to my recent video where I explained how the new system works. As per usual, things are still subject to change, but if there are any changes made, it will most likely be for their damage values and nothing too significant that will drastically change how the character works. And just a heads up, this will only be part 1 of the Liberation characters analysis because we still don't have the damage values for each of the characters. So right now, we will mainly be focusing on how each of the characters work to give you an idea on what they will bring to your team. And then we will follow up with another video once we get additional details for each of the characters. To start things off, we will go over how their skills work, and then we will go over the reasons why you would choose a character over the other, and see if there is a definitive best character out of the 3. So first up, we have Sin. Sin is an assault rifle user, and she is from the missileless line of units. Her skill 1 is a passive that activates when her last bullet hits the enemy. How this works is that it basically gives her more HP based on the maximum HP of your ally with the highest HP and the value percent of the skill level. On top of that, this will also stun all of your enemies for a specified amount of time. The description says, stun all enemies for X amount of seconds, but when you take a look at Winter Rupee's burst skill, which has similar wording, attract means that it has a taunt effect, not a stun. It could be either one or maybe both, so we'll just have to wait for more details about this ability. Moving on, we have her skill 2. This is another passive ability that activates after the full burst mode ends. This gives her an additional burst gauge loading speed, something similar to Winter Rupee's ability, but it only affects Sin. The second part of this ability activates when Sin uses her burst, and the effect changes depending on how many times you use her burst. So the more times you use it, the more buffs you get. Using her burst once will recover a small percent of her attack damage as HP, and this will last for a set amount of time. In other words, this will give her lifesteal. Using her burst twice will increase her HP potency for a short duration, which basically means that she will receive more healing during that period. And the last effect of this ability will give her increased defense for a short duration. All of the effects from this ability synergize very well. The second effect directly buffs the first effect, and on top of that, the increased defense will further improve her survivability. Next, we have her burst. How this works is it's simply a damaging ability that affects all of the enemies within range, and this can increase the damage taken for all of your enemies if there are more enemies than the specified amount in the skill condition. Sin has a lot of similarities to a unit that we already have, and that is Winter Shopper Rupee. They both have very similar skills that focus on tanking and survivability. The only difference being, Sin has more offensive effects, and Winter Rupee has more defensive and supportive utility. Next up, we have Quency. She is an SMG user and her kit is pretty straightforward and somewhat similar to what Sin has. Her skill 1 is almost the exact same skill 1 from Sin. The only difference is Quency's skill 1 has no stun, so a possible compromise they can make is by giving Quency's stun a longer duration compared to Sin's first ability. Moving on, Quency's skill 2 will increase the attack for some of your allies with the highest attack by a certain percent for a short duration. This can be a good utility because it has no skill condition, which means that this will instantly trigger after its set cooldown duration. And lastly, we have her burst. This will increase the maximum HP and critical damage for some of your allies with the highest attack. So unlike Sin, they might have a few similarities, but Quency's kit has more supportive capabilities that are only applied to her teammates, and she has no effects that are directly applied to herself. And before we move on to further comparisons, let's first talk about Guilty. Guilty is a shotgun user that focuses more on dealing damage. Her skill 1 activates after landing a specific number of normal attacks. This will give her an additional percent of attack based on her ally with the highest attack. You will be able to stack this a number of times, and this will also have a short duration. Moving on, we have her skill 2. This will activate after landing a number of normal attacks, and this ability will only apply to your wind type allies. This will increase the stack count for your buffs by a number of times, and it will also increase their attack for a short duration. It was not specified, but the stacks will most likely be increased by 1 just like Rupee's ability. As I mentioned, this is similar to what Rupee has, so if the bug is still not fixed by the time Guilty is in your team, she will be able to give your team permanent buffs if the passive effects they have do not stack. And lastly, we have her burst. This will affect a number of enemies with the highest defense, dealing a certain amount of damage. And if Guilty's skill 1 has maximum stacks, this will then decrease the target's defense for a short duration, and also deal a percent of her attack as additional damage. So now that we know how their kits work, we will now go over why you would choose one over the other. Do keep in mind that I will be basing my recommendations on how their kit function, because that's the only complete information we have, so things might be slightly different once we get the actual numbers for their skills. Overall, the best character to go for highly depends on what you need in your team, but unfortunately, Sin is my least recommended out of the three. It was not yet specified, but Sin will most likely be a defender class unit that will fill the role of a tank in your team. She has a good kit, but I don't see her being a better option for the tanks that we have now. If you already have Noise, Senti, Noah, Ludmilla, or any of the top tier tanks available, you can probably skip Sin. Also comparing her to Winter Rupee, if Sin's lifesteal will be somewhat similar to what Winter Rupee has, she will also have the same problem where she will be taking on the tank role, but she won't have enough self-sustain to survive on the field. Now when it comes to Quency, she is sort of like the middle ground for both offensive and defensive utility, which also means that her skills are spread out thin, making her not that great for either one. But she can still be a good pick because two of her skills have effects that apply to multiple members in your team. If I were to give one reason why I did not put her as a priority for the Liberation system, it is because her skill 1 in the first part of her burst is not that great. When you take a look at the meta right now, additional HP is not the best option for survivability. You can simply slot in a really good shielder like Polly who can also buff your team's damage, or just use someone like Senti who can put up a shield frequently. With that said, she still has the potential to be a really good pick depending on the numbers she gets for her attack and critical damage buff. And for my number 1 priority, it is going to be Guilty. Quency and Guilty are somewhat interchangeable. It just highly depends on what you are looking for. I would say that Guilty is less flexible than Quency just because her skill 2 only applies to the wind type units, and the fact that she is a shotgun user means that her range is limited. In the right scenarios where you are using her in close range stages, and maybe you have a couple of wind type units in your team, I can see her performing very well. Not only does she increase her own personal damage, but she also increases your team's attack given that they have the wind element. On top of that, she also decreases the enemy's defense, therefore increasing the damage dealt by your team. So because of that, I would say that she has the best kit out of them, with Quency being a close second, and Sin being my least recommended out of the characters on the list. With that being said, this has been part 1 of my Liberation System characters analysis, so stay tuned for part 2, which will be released once we get more information about them. Let me know which character you are going for. I would love to hear your thoughts on each one of them, and as always, if you found this video useful, don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.